Good morning and good afternoon, LinkedIn friends, Value First Nation. Welcome to another episode of Value First Measurement with Danielle Urban. Happy Monday, Danielle.
Happy Monday.
Indeed. Had such a good time. Thank you so much again for inviting Nick on the show last week. That was such a good conversation.
We couldn't have had that conversation without him, truly.
Right. I do look forward. He's going to hang out with us at the Data Summit now at the end of the month. So we're excited about that. Announced that at the end of last week. It has a lot to do with these conversations that we're having every Monday. So August 28th, all day, Value First Data Summit. Come hang out with us and maybe fix some data, while you're there. Fix some data strategy. But today we are talking about principle number 5 from the Value First Measurement Framework. And I'm going to read it here and then we'll get into it. Number 5, we will measure to learn rather than to justify. We build measurement. We believe measurement creates its greatest value through insight rather than judgment. We commit to using metrics primarily as tools for discovery and improvement rather than as weapons for justification or evaluation. This means we will ask, what can we learn from this before did we succeed or fail, rather than using measurement primarily for performance evaluation. We will create safe spaces for sharing disappointing results without fear rather than punishing teams for metric performance. We will reward insights gained rather than targets hit, creating measurement-driven incentive systems. We will use metrics to inform decisions rather than to make them automatically. We will treat measurement as the beginning of conversations, not the end, rather than using metrics to close off discussion. And our implementation example, instead of using sales pipeline metrics to evaluate rep performance, use them to understand what relationship building approaches create lasting customer partnerships, making measurement discussions about collective learning rather than individual accountability. What comes to mind after I read that stuff?
I'm so deeply triggered. There's like
It's really hard to do that. It's really hard not to do that in this filler. Like it's like all of this is like so true.
Yeah.
And like hopefully we can help you move away from this. But yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. I mean, there have been so many of my previous marketing roles where it's like we have to hit our MQL target. And I don't think I ever got to the point where I was like moving the goalpost on it, but that was a known thing. It was like, well, if they're not working, then like what are we doing wrong? And you start to evaluate like what is the criteria of MQL and are we even doing it right? So it's like we balance between trust the numbers as a metric of success, which is what we're telling you not to do. And then the other side of it is like, don't trust the numbers and question everything, which is in the context of what I just described was sort of a name and blame game. It was like, is it that you didn't set it up right? Rather than like, let's see what we can learn about this subset of people given what we've been able to measure. So if it's like we went to some conference, we had a whole bunch of badge scans, dumped them into HubSpot, and just waited to see what happened. Whether that was like marketing follow-up where we dropped them in a nurture sequence, did we do something specific for them? Did we just pass them back to sales because they all had a sales touch at the conference anyway? Whatever it was, we had situations with all of those examples, but whichever one it was like drop them in the top and then wait and see what happened. And a month later, you would say, okay, we have this many MQLs from that conference. Well, if they all had a conversation with a salesperson and then it fell off, like, is it really an MQL? Was it an SQL that then dropped to an invalid lead? Like, what is it? And so if we as a marketing team are doing that list import and then waiting to see what happens and saying, okay, we got, 30% of those became MQLs. It's like, well, they shouldn't have. They were all ICP, like either 100% of them should have or like none of them. There's this like doesn't make sense to set this benchmark and have like a universal benchmark for this specific situation. Like we were just sort of running at something very rigid and then either questioning its validity or hinging our like entire team success on that number.
Yeah, maybe this is the principle that makes it so hard to like just look at the data we have. Like why is that part so hard for teams, do you think?
Well, I think we've talked about this a lot where like the numbers come from everywhere. So like everyone's demanding numbers. You've got to report things to the board. You've got to get these metrics solidified to a point where they can be understood outside of your little sphere that's trying to do something with them. But I think that's still okay, as long as there's some level of consistency. But I think when it comes to your individual team, like the example you gave with a sales team, if you're using one very specific, say, conversion rate metric between two deal stages to evaluate your sales team member, you are completely blind to so many different things. I just had a case on, I think it was Friday night. I kept getting a message from a client and they were like, my emails aren't getting delivered. And so we dug in so deep on like domains and making sure that their, DMARC was 100% valid. And like there was even some question because they didn't have it specified, which really should mean it should default to something else. But we were trying to make sure that was working. Come to find out, the email that wasn't getting delivered had like a dozen high res images embedded in it. And it was like you scroll and scroll and scroll. And this was the first email that was being sent to people who had filled out a form. And I was like, okay, so after complete assessment of all of the data that I could capture about this through my machine and not having conversation with this person, because we were trying to do like a quick one-off fix on a Friday, we discovered the issue is not at all the technology. It's the fact that you tried to send an email that had 12 high res images in it the first time you're sending to their domain. Like, yeah, they're all going to get marked as spam. That makes sense. And HubSpot was preventing him from sending the emails because they look
Right.
spammy. And so being able to put all those pieces together was like, oh, we had all these data points and we were running at the data points. And then I looked at it and was like, oh, that's not the problem here. But that's such a good example. Like it's a bit of an abstraction, but it's such a good example of how you just get lost in the numbers and the structure and the thing that you think it is, when in reality, there's something else entirely happening. And you really have to look at all the information that's in front of you, outside of that single KPI or that single metric.
Yeah. And that is a great example of like this idea of not always gaming the system, but most of the time, yeah, it is gaming. Like you're like, okay, anything that's like, okay, how do we tweak the subject line? Like we just like go right to that,
Yeah.
right? Like right to that, because that's what we've been taught to do. To
Yeah.
like put people's
Chase the
names in the
numbers.
subject line. And like we all know that game. Like
Yeah.
and nobody else wants to play it, by the way. Um, and versus, like you said, like take a step back. Like, can we take a moment to learn instead of going right to optimization? Right.
Right.
Because we all have this book, this toolbox of optimization, and we just go right to that checklist.
Yeah.
Right. Because it can be like once you have the strategy in place, it can be that simple. That's why A/B testing works. Like,
Yeah.
but if you haven't started from that place of like strategic foundation,
Yeah.
like checking those boxes isn't going to matter. Like your example showed.
Yeah. Well, and bringing that back to the marketing side of things, like you're saying, if you just A/B test a subject line that one has a person's name in it and the other doesn't, you're still missing the forest for the trees. In that, does that message even speak to the audience? And if you can't answer that question, you should not be A/B testing. You probably shouldn't even be sending an email yet. And I think most marketers, I'll give more credit to than that. But it's so easy to fall into that, like, oh, I agonized over this campaign. I tried to do all of this lineup. but did you take that extra minute to gut check? Like, is the person or hopefully small group of people receiving this email, is this message going to resonate with them? Does this answer something for them? Does it stand out? And I think that's what we're all trying to do. But you get lost in that detail because you're trying to hit the open rates, or you're doing an A/B test and you want to get the clear winner, and so you're trying to get numbers to go with it. And it's still just like, well, if that message didn't resonate, what's the bigger problem? It's not the subject line. It's that this isn't the right thing to be talking about.
Yeah. And I think more and more, like, especially the higher you get in the funnel, like you might not know exactly like
Yeah.
what's going to work in that moment. That's where a large part of value first is just trying to get you to take a step back
Yeah.
and understand that AI is barreling forward. And if you can think about this from the prospecting agent perspective, right, in HubSpot, and I love these conversations with Clement on value first communication. It's like, if you can take a step back and understand you don't have as much control as you once did. Meanwhile, you do have data, right? You have data and context in your system,
Mm-hmm.
but also AI is researching and finding data for context related to each individual contact. So literally, if prospecting agent is the one doing all the emailing, every single subject line might be different, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can literally make every email personal if you have the data and context. And why wouldn't you? Like, if you trusted it to work that way,
That's a
which
big
is why
if, but
I
yes.
moved to like trust milestones instead of like 30, 60, 90,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the build part is not the hard part anymore. Like AI is doing more and more of that. So we should be able to take a step back
Mm-hmm.
and say, like, should you be thinking so hard on your A/B test campaigns
Right.
if you have this? Like, we literally in Content Remix right now, we can build out a content campaign and then remake it for another list,
Mm-hmm.
right? A new campaign like of assets, things that we've been wanting to do forever. And just there was no time. Like,
Yeah.
and so if you're so, let's say, if you don't have the safety to take a step back and say, hey, maybe we shouldn't care about this KPI anymore.
Mm.
Like maybe open rates are not the thing to be focused on because we don't have enough control over the inbox and how the people are engaging with us, right? If you can't take a step back, then you're going to miss out on this like age of AI that's coming and can support you in ways to where if you can take a step back and do the strategy piece, wow, like you can get super personal with stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking back to my conference example where you get to use Content Remix to create a campaign around every event. It depends on your event calendar. You know, there are companies that do it once a year, once a month, once a week, once a day, and they've got teams all over the place. But if it's so easy to personalize content in a way that speaks the message you're trying to share, um, like if me as a marketer, I'm trying to follow up on these people that we spoke to at a conference. We've got some campaign we're running that relates to things that the people at that conference would be interested in. How do I take those campaign assets and make them specific to that conference? Because maybe it was a series of roundtables that you're following up with. Maybe it was a booth where you got scans. Maybe it was, you know, a small meetup in a specific city. And each of those you would want to have a different type of follow up, but it can still be the same message. It's like, hey, let's continue this conversation with this thing that we already built and we think is really cool and relevant for you. But you need to bridge that gap between the very real thing that happened and the campaign you're trying to run and the metrics that you want to get out of that campaign. But like, how do you put those pieces together? And I think we have the tools to be able to do that. And, you know, one marketer, a small marketing team can now bridge that gap way easier and actually do that Whereas before it was just completely unreasonable. You drop them all in the same nurture because you don't have capacity to do anything else. And so then hyper manage those nurture numbers and the email open rates and the click rates and the click to deal conversion. It's like that is what we had to do because we had to scale. And I think we've got the tools. We just need to shift to letting those tools and trusting. There's a lot of trust that needs to be built there, but trusting that middle piece to enable us to make it more relevant.
Yeah. I think usually an underrated part is the debrief, like with the other humans
Yes.
involved too. Like, which is easy to miss because we're all graded on different things. Like, but one of the worst gaming examples is just getting badges. Like, just scan as many. We don't care if it's all
Yeah.
students. We're like, we got to hit 150,
Yeah.
right? It's like, and then
Turn
the
around.
sales team looks at the list, like, what do you guys, what's, what? Like, isn't at all what I experienced from the event. And
Yeah.
like, if you're not having a debrief after the event where everybody can just, and this is where not the safe space isn't always there,
Right.
like to have this, right? Because everybody has preconceived notions. A lot of people know, well, this team's measured on this. So of course they're doing it this way and it's not going to help me in my job. So let's just like cut out this meeting. I'll just get to closing business like after the event. Cause I had a lot of great conversations
Right.
that I know I can pull forward and I'm not going to wait for some nurture flow to
Yeah.
happen. If it's not in the system, I can't follow up on it. So I'm going to follow up on it on this way. Right.
Hmm.
And even in those cases, like taking more like closed one debriefs,
Mm.
man, like there's so much that's trying to like wrap my head around like why it's so hard to get to those moments where it's like, look, we were all involved in this sale that just happened. Can we just sit down and talk about what happened like out
Yeah.
loud? Right.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen teams like execute that like
I
successfully?
have, but it's usually in the really small teams. So it's like you're so small that you have an all hands team meeting like every Monday afternoon, or you have a sales and marketing alignment on a weekly basis and you talk through what's happening. But I usually only see that with like companies that are under 50 employees, usually even smaller than that, because there just don't need to be layers of management that get in the way of those conversations when you're an organization that small. And I think if you get to the point where you've got multiple layers of management on both sales and marketing, then it ends up being the leaders that talk to each other. Well, how much are the leaders involved and how much are they really digging into it? Alongside sort of the practitioners who are jumping in and sending the emails and making things happen, and the practitioners who are measured on the performance of those tactics that are happening in the deal closing process. And so if you I don't have the answer, but, like, there hopefully is some way to get sort of the people who clicked buttons to make those things happen and make that interaction exist, create that possibility in both marketing and sales, and then have leadership understand, what patterns could potentially come of that, but not taking it to an extreme and making that pattern a volume play, but rather, like, understanding, let's look at 3 of the most recently closed deals and talk through all of the touch points. That should happen on, like, a biweekly basis, and pull in all the layers of management, like, pull in the, SDR who had the first contact on that call and get their, like, personal read on it. I don't care what they put in the notes. Tell me how you felt coming out of that call. Or maybe there's even a way to record that detail and put it in a GPT, like, have it be your, like, go-to-market knowledge base of, like, internal perception of how deals are closing. That would be so cool.
Yeah. I think like you mentioned, when you get to that scale, it's the management's job to create the space for that,
Yeah.
right? Because that's a lot of times if we talk about these trust milestones, like if you can get to the moment where it's data capture at all costs
Mm,
inside of HubSpot, the team can learn from the data and AI can learn from the data and AI can help the team learn from the data.
right.
And I would have to imagine like most of the team meetings, and this is where it's like, doesn't matter how small it is, It's like most of the time you haven't reviewed the data before you get there. So you spend the meeting reviewing the data and disagreeing on what it means, and then you can't take action on it. Right. So
Yeah.
obviously, as that scales, it gets worse and worse, and everybody thinks it's a waste of time. And now we can't have any meetings on the calendar
Mm-hmm.
versus like if you can get these ready-made insights because everybody's looking at the same dashboards and everybody got the unstructured data in, like call
Mm-hmm.
recordings, transcripts, notes, like the things that the human will tell you on a live unrecorded call,
Mm-hmm.
like versus what they actually put in the CRM. If we create the psychological safety for them to be okay with giving it to putting it in front of other humans, like their bosses that say you got to hit these KPIs and like can't help but give off like big brother vibes.
Yeah.
Like when you say like, oh, look at this leaderboard. Everybody get excited about competing. And it's like, man, that doesn't work for everybody.
And the leaderboard is the number of calls made. Yeah.
Right. Like, yeah, let's drive some better behavior. But not in the name of performance, right?
Right.
Like if you can shift the mindset to learning and like helping each other grow, like this is what the best teams are doing. Like it's not rocket science. Um, and if you can do that now, because I'm like these close one debriefs work because they're unstructured. You hear about structured and unstructured data
Yeah.
like constantly. The truest unstructured data is in the heads of all the people. Like,
Right.
right? We've got to get it out. And if you can do that a couple of times live, then you can enable them to actually, be okay with recording calls if they're not. Sometimes you got to help them be challengers of customers who might not want to be recorded on calls, right? I think we're seeing less and less of that.
Yeah.
But like getting everybody aligned with how important it is to see this stuff in an objective way inside of the CRM, right? Sometimes it has nothing to do with using the CRM. It's
Right.
like, oh, if I put it there, then this person's going to see it. Last time I did that, this bad thing happened. So
Yeah.
I'm out. Like, meanwhile, I've been getting, uh, rewarded for crushing in sales without using the CRM. So, like,
Right.
why would I do it any differently? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of like shifting from numbers to information accessibility. And I mean, that's why we're here. But I think using that closed one meeting debrief as an example, like that conversation, the next level of maturity, if you've got it like in people's heads, they're going to do whatever they want to do with it. You get it into a meeting where everyone has enough psychological safety, has no fear of losing their job because they say something wrong, and can give their candid feedback, like their personal feedback and their personal perception of what was happening, that we then track against the data that we have, that's like hard and fast data. We heard from this person, it moved to this stage at this date, they signed the contract on this date. You can pull together a really cool story. And then the next layer of that is like, how do you just get people to do that without even a conversation? How do you just make that debrief moment, even if it's like they hang up the call and then hit record in another platform, or they have some kind of voice note that they can start talking into and say like, wow, I bombed that, or like, here's how we could have set that up to be better, or here's the information I wish I had available to that. Like, that's not going to get captured anywhere. The like person who has to do the job can go walk over and talk to, a product marketer or the marketing team if there's some kind of enablement with documentation, like whatever it is, that's the person before them that they could go talk to. Hopefully they'll do that. But that's not really standard. Like, you have to have a really solid culture for that to happen. And even with remote teams, like it's pretty rare that someone's going to be like, all right, Slack huddle, let's go. So if you can shift it from like it's in their heads, now we've got it in a meeting, now we have it in unstructured data in the same place that all of this is happening, then I think it can scale to a point where you get actual real insights that you would never get anywhere else.
Yeah. No, That's well said. And
Confessional.
I'll say right. And the last layer, the new-ish layer, because I think this has always been a case when you try to automate systems like CRM, like HubSpot, like the AI replacement concerns, right?
Mhm.
That's another reason to hold back your insights and your expertise from the system,
Mhm.
right? So it's probably harder than ever to create this safe space if it's never been there before, but just know if you don't get there, right? Like all the KPIs in the world will not create the insights that you're looking for or you could be getting,
Mhm.
right? And that's where leadership teams have to come into play. Because at the end of the day, sales managers, marketing managers, they will talk to people enough
Mhm.
to understand it's just going to be like this whole concept of 30% of your time is spent selling.
Mhm.
Like it's not just CRM admin, it's like meetings, like
Yeah.
having one-on-ones constantly just to say, like, where's this deal at? Where's this deal at? What can I help with? Like, yeah, we
Mhm.
appreciate that people will show up for each other in that way.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, we could probably like trim that down a ton. Um, but it starts with creating that safety to use these asynchronous mechanisms, like
Mhm.
to share information. Oh man, these go by so fast.
I know,
Um,
right?
we are done with another one. Next week, we will be talking about principle number 6. If I can pull it up here, whichever one I was looking at, there it is. Uh, which is we will value pace over speed. That's going to be a fun one.
Yeah.
So until then, until next week, again, check out the Value First Data Summit, August 28th. We can help with a lot of these problems via workshops, actually digging into the data and getting stuff done. But until next week, Danielle, thanks so much.
Thank you. See you next week.